So in the interest of time, I know people are still logging in. I'm going to go ahead and get started. So I'd like to welcome everyone to the quarterly call for Policy and Taxation Group supporters and Family Enterprise USA members. So why don't we go ahead and get started? Frank, thank you so much for joining us. We're going to turn it over to you.
I hate going first because there's nothing that's going on in the markets right now. It's been a really boring period. There's not really policy coming out of Washington. So, Pat, I'm going to send it back to you because I've really got nothing to say. Okay.
Yeah.
First and foremost, if people have been asking me at what point do people start to re-examine their vote and they start to consider whether or not they like what's happening in Washington right now, and that moment has come. It's come over the last 3 or 4 days. It's come because people have seen the average impact of their retirement savings cut by anywhere from 10 to 15%. It's come because the global markets are cratering. It's come because the media has rightfully seen that this is a weakness. And by the way, I'm going to do about 5 minutes with you all, just kind of what's going on, and then I'll take whatever questions you have. This is a big deal. And the part that matters most to you all is that this is actually making it harder and harder for this administration to put forward its tax extenders. What I'd like to say is the biggest tax increase for those who are opposed to maintaining the current tax position. And in fact, I'm happy to report that more and more Republicans are now using the language that this would be the biggest tax increase in American history if it is not supported. I also warn you that Democrats have narrowed down their message, that this is tax increases for hardworking Americans to give tax cuts to billionaires. But what is happening right now with the tariffs, with prices not continuing to fall, with a sense of instability and insecurity in the economy, that Donald Trump began this administration with a honeymoon. He was net favorable of 11 points on January 20th, which is the most favorable that Trump has been at any point in his career. And now it's negative 13, and it is because of the tariffs, it is because prices have not fallen, and it's going to have an impact on the ability of House Republicans to pass the Senate legislation. It's going to have an effect on Senate Republicans aligning with the House. And in the end, we're all just sitting here waiting to see what happens. I'm going to use a phrase that Pat's going to wince over, but frankly, Washington is once again a shit show. And this time it is the Republicans who are contributing to it. And this time everything is at stake. So let me give you 5 things to watch for going forward, and then I'll take your questions. Number 1, there is a deadline. There is going to be a debt ceiling deadline that's approaching this summer, which is why it is so important that they continue to do the things they must do to further the efforts on the budget, to further the efforts on tax legislation. It is going to be threading a needle, but they have to move it forward, and they've been unable to do so. Number 2, the context for pushing this forward has now been set. That at a time like this, you don't raise taxes on anyone. At a time like this, you need more money in the markets, more money for the public to spend as they see fit, more opportunity for family businesses like those who are represented here. We need more, not less. And that context has also been set. Number 3, it's the holy trinity of the media, the court system, and the special interest groups that are working against extending these taxes. And I see it and I feel it. I was back in Washington last week, and they're getting their mojo together. They're getting their shit together because there's a weakness in this administration. And one final point. you are not going to see the kind of tax cuts in the areas that we're all working towards if the markets are 15% lower than they were on Inauguration Day. So Pat, the last time I did a presentation for you is pretty happy news. Things were looking pretty good. I gotta tell you that things have changed over the last 96 hours. And I'm unconvinced that they're going to change back because people are digging in their heels. And while some countries have come to the negotiating table and Trump can claim some victories, there's too much devastation financially for me to believe that we're in a strong position right now. I'm very happy about who's been shared the information of the work that you all did, about where the public stands on family businesses. And I'm pleased to see some people adopting that language already on these Sunday shows. But I'm even more displeased about the market instability and what has happened over the last 96 hours and the consequence of that on getting the policies you want done. So this is a pretty quick overview. I actually beat the 5-minute mark, but I got time to answer questions from you all. Be afraid, be very afraid. Pat?
So Frank, I'll ask the first question, which is, okay, the tariffs, we knew this was going to happen initially, but it's
No,
been such a
hold on.
short time horizon.
We did not know that it was going to be this deep. We did not
Okay.
know of China going to pass a tariff on everything just as dramatic as us. We did not know that the entire world was going to turn against us. We did not know that every market was going to collapse over 48 hours. Now they've steadied. There's a base to this. Has anyone found tariffs are a good thing? Yes. The Secretary of Commerce. Yes. The Secretary of the Treasury. These business people who are advising Donald Trump do not have the guts to say, sir, we've made a mistake. This is a very blunt conversation with you all. They did not expect it to be this dramatic. So I apologize for interrupting you. I need to stop doing that. But it's deserved because it is that significant and it's going to have that much of an impact on what you're trying to do over the next 3 months.
So is this what you mean when you say the weakness in the administration, that there's no one there that can tell President Trump that this is a bad idea or that it should be curtailed?
They believe this. The person who makes economic policy is the Secretary of the Treasury. The number 2 person who's often the number 1 when it comes to language is the Commerce Secretary. You've got Peter Navarro saying everything's fine. The only person who is challenging this is Elon Musk. And unfortunately, he has less credibility today than he's had at any time since he jumped on the Trump train. And he's fighting with everyone in the administration. And he's fighting with them because while people want cuts to government bureaucracy, they do not want cuts to government services. And they're concerned that people are getting fired for no cause. They're taking a sledgehammer when a scalpel is more appropriate. And I've been saying this on CNN and CNBC and Bloomberg. And I know it's being heard within the White House, but no one says, stop doing this. And it's having damage. I know, by the way, that some of the people on this call are big donors to the Trump campaign. Guess what, y'all? I usually am saying to you, talk to the Democrats. I'm now saying to you, pick up the phone, call the people you know in the administration, and tell them that it is not having the impact you thought it was going to have, and this is really damaging. Because the money is not going to be there for the things you need, and this is the only time you're going to get this opportunity, because at this point, the Democrats, now that they got their sea legs, thanks to Cory Booker, I think the Democrats are taking over the House in 2 years. So we have to do this right now.
So what is the message to President Trump? Is it, rescind all of these tariffs? Is it modify it? What's the answer?
Do it one at a time. Bring your allies on side. Taiwan is not your enemy. Israel, my God, we're giving all this money to Israel and then we're tariffing them double digits. Why? Why are we having a fight with the neighbors to the north and to the south? Why are we at war with a country with a special relationship, the UK? Our enemy is Russia. Our enemy is China. Our enemy is Iran. And our enemy is North Korea. Though, and write it down. Those are the 4 countries that should be bearing the brunt of this economic effort. And it is deserved, but not for people who are fighting alongside us, not for people who for decades have had our backs and we've had theirs. Go it one at a time. And by the way, I hate the message go slow, because that's not what this administration is about to, it's not about their approach. They really are about flood the zone, and they're correct. They've had more success. Before you think I'm completely beating up on them, they've had more success in a shorter time than any president since FDR in 1933. But they're also beginning to have losses. They're also beginning to see a cratering in their support. And Pat, I don't care about Republicans. I don't care about Democrats. I care about independents. And the independents are leaving this administration as fast as they can change their minds. That's the problem. So the messaging is keep your friends close, push your enemies away.
So I am really glad you brought up the tariffs, because all of our family businesses are concerned about them, or at least most of them are concerned about it. But I want to ask you, and people, please put your questions in the Q&A in the chat. There is a question in the Q&A. It's not about tariffs, but it's something similar, which is what we just heard this week and last week on increasing the tax rate for the wealthy as high as maybe 40%. So what's your take on that?
There's no, I don't know any Republican in the House or Senate who vote for it. Literally none. So if he decides that he wants to do it as a way to be a populist, as a way to appeal to these people, he's going to have no takers. But that approach can have a souring impact on all the other things that you're trying to do. I want clarity, I want consistency, and I want stability. And all of those elements are absolutely essential to doing the big things that need to get done right now. And any attempt to suggest that the rich should pay more in taxes coming from a Republican is as awful as you can imagine it to be. And if that actually comes out of the White House as a proposal, I think everything else fails as a result.
So there is a question in the Q&A. How will the House and this? Go ahead.
Family businesses, something that we learned. You're the first to be at work in the morning. You're the last to leave at night. You're the last to get paid. The American people, it isn't small businesses, it is family businesses. Family, generationally owned. People know the sacrifice, they know the effort. Once again, you need to keep telling those stories. But in the end, does it help the family business? That is a great way to set a benchmark. And increasing taxes for the most successful doesn't help a family business. You're on the right side here. Republicans have to keep that message consistent, no matter how much the president careens from side to side. I'm sorry for interrupting.
No, I'm glad you brought that up, because we just did this work around family businesses. And as you know, we've been saying for a very long time that it is family business, not small business, even though small businesses, of course, are family businesses, but so are medium and large size businesses. So we've met with the White House. We've tried to get that message across. But I just want to tell everyone that the work that we did with Frank in the last family business survey was pretty amazing. And we learned that 78% of the voters actually trust a family business more than they trust a regular corporation. 84% agree that family businesses shouldn't pay more than regular businesses, and yet we know they do because 80% of them are pass-through entities. But on the other side of that, 63% of the voters, and we've seen this go up, Frank, support a wealth tax in this country. The good news is 67% of the voters actually oppose a death tax. So as Frank's saying, with that data, we've all been talking about it. We think it's very, very important for family businesses to be talking about it, to continue to tell their story. So Frank, I'm going to ask you this question in the Q&A. I will say that I think that Russ and Michael and maybe Bart on this call are going to address this question somewhat. But it's how will the House and the Senate get out of the conference for the reconciliation, given how far apart they're on the spending? Will the Ds need to be included, given the Freedom Caucus refusal to vote for spending increases?
Well, the Ds needing to be included. If they're not willing to play ball, then it doesn't matter that you want to include them. Because if they're not participating, you don't have control over them. The problem is the House and the Senate are setting up different systems with different priorities and a different approach, and they haven't been brought together. This is more for, which we can be talking about later. Excuse me, once again, consistency is essential. Predictability is essential. A level playing field. I want them to work together. I would pull them aside. Trump is uniquely capable to do this. Take Johnson and take Thune to Mar-a-Lago, shut the door and say, I'm not feeding you until you all come. At least you find more common ground than what you have right now. Pat, the pressure on Thune among his colleagues is intense. It's the same thing that's going on the House side. And instead of the White House putting pressure on them to cooperate, it seems like we continue to move the ball down the field without that unified. They have a unified mission, but they don't have a unified vision. And that's the problem. And this is the stuff I used to do 10 years ago. They used to have me get in the room with both sides, but I don't do that anymore. And they don't gather together anymore. So it's very hard to do. And I'm hoping that your other guests will have a slightly better news than I do, but I'm just hearing that they're simply not on the same page.
Well, thank you for that, Frank. That grim news. You're right. Wasn't as optimistic as last time, but we all know that you're a pessimist. So we put that in perspective.
Don't dismiss me for that way. Because look, even paranoid people have enemies. Even pessimists have things go wrong. We are in a problem. And if I was looking at your group right now and asked them how many of you are worth 10% less than you were 7 days ago, there's a reason to be pessimistic.
Yeah, I understand. I agree. All right. Well, we know your time is limited, so we thank you for joining our call today. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
We'll see you in DC in May. Take
Excellent.
care.
I'll see you guys.
Bye-bye. So now, Russ, I'm going to turn it over to you so you can introduce our guest.
Great. Thank you very much, Pat. And thank you to all those participating today. We're honored today to have one of my colleagues here at Brownstein, Bart Rising. He's served on the Hill for a very good while. And he rose very quickly through the ranks to be Majority Leader Scalise's Deputy Chief of Staff. He built relationships with all the House Republican members, and is an expert on how to get things done in the House of Representatives. And so thank you, Bart, for joining us today. And you've heard Frank Luntz, and he's not feeling optimistic right at this moment. Tell us what you think is happening today, and tell us how the Speaker Scalise and Speaker Johnson and Majority Leader Scalise actually deal with this caucus conference and those that have different views of what they'd like the budget resolution to say.
Yeah, thanks, Russ. And I'm happy to be joining all of you today. As Russ said, I was on the Hill for a little over 14 years. I was in House Republican leadership for 11 of those years. So I understand the current makeup of the conference quite uniquely. What I'll say is I think that the leadership is taking things day by day, problem by problem. You know, this is a wily bunch, especially on the House side, that they have to contend with. Obviously, the president will be meeting with a handful or more of those members here this afternoon to shake loose the disagreements on the budget resolution. My take from talking to friends in leadership right now is this is a zero fail mission. And I've said this to my colleagues at Brownstein and our clients for the last few weeks. This thing could die several deaths before it gets done. So fret not if we're witnessing the first death, right? This disagreement over what the Senate passed on Saturday versus, you know, where some of these House members' positions are. But I think everyone in the conference knows, and I think some of the guys on the far right that are saying we're a no on this today, let's see what they say after visiting with the president, point number one. Point number two, I think they would privately concede to you that they understand that this has to get done, that the president is very strong in our party right now, speaking as a Republican, and they understand that going against him and slowing down the agenda he wants passed is perilous for them to do. So in that, you know, they understand they have to get on board with the team. Now, that doesn't mean they can't, you know, bellyache and moan and have to be drugged to that conclusion, which I think is what you're seeing play out now. But everyone knows that there's a short window here to get this thing done, because you want to get it done if you're a Republican, because you want the positive effects of it to be into the economy as quickly as possible so that the vulnerable members can go home and say, look at the economy. We did that. They need something tangible to point to in the midterms, because obviously the deck is stacked against you in the midterms. If you look historically, the party in power over the last 100 years has defied those odds twice. I think, you know, look at what economy. Yeah, I get that. But I think that, you know, the president has said you got to take some medicine that'll be a little uncomfortable to kind of get to the other side. And I think that's what you're seeing right now.
So Bart, is it, are the people that are resisting, can we really narrow down to sort of one of three things? Is it those who maybe don't want big Medicaid cuts, those who really do want lots of cuts to make sure we're reducing the deficit, and the members who don't like that $10,000 cap on state and local taxes? Does that cover the basic waterfront, or are they very individualistic in their concerns?
No, I mean, I think you just covered the three groups that the leadership is on the House side is currently dealing with, right? The Medicaid cuts is a beast in and of itself. You've got some folks that are still around from 2017 when we tackled healthcare reform, and some of them lost and came back, and they would tell you they lost because of that healthcare vote. And so there is a little heartburn when it comes to the Medicaid cuts. I think that, you know, you'll see in the coming weeks once they transition from budget over to actually writing this reconciliation bill, you'll see polling that comes out and backs up the need to tighten the Medicaid program. There is waste, fraud, and abuse, and certainly in some of these states where these members that are vulnerable come from. And so I think you'll see them highlighting those. And the argument they're going to be successful on making is that they're looking at strengthening the program so that it lasts for the people that it was intended to. So that's point number one. I think you've got some on the far right in the Republican conference that don't believe that their position will win out in the end over the Senate and the number of cuts. And I think that's what you see the heartburn right now on, is they don't actually believe that that'll happen.
So that they would take some tough votes and say, we got to cut $2 trillion out of the federal budget. And then in the end, the Senate will only be able to cut $1 trillion or some lesser amount. And so they will cast a tough vote but not actually see the savings in the reduction of the deficit.
Yeah, they just don't believe it'll actually happen. They think that they'll, you know, get jammed by the Senate on that. Now, look, they stuck together on their budget vote a few weeks ago, and they jammed the Senate, right? And we haven't seen the House jam the Senate in quite some time. And as a former leadership staffer, it makes me yearn for all the things we could have done over my 11 years in that building had we stuck together, right? That was always the message to these guys. Let's stick together and you'll see what we can get done. And they never did. Well, they finally did. And look what happened. They jammed the Senate in a lot of ways. So I think that you will see leadership lean heavily on that message again, and they're going to lean heavily on the president to help deliver these members. So I think it'll be an interesting next 24 to 36 hours in the House of Representatives.
All right, Pat, did we have any questions for Bart?
We have some questions that I think any of the team could answer, but certainly Bart. So he's asking about the 199A and the rate cut, increasing that top rate. So what do you think about 199A actually surviving? And I think the question is there a chance that 20% could go up?
I mean, we were on a call about this a week or so, right, Russ, ago? I mean, I think there's a lot of people in the Republican conference that recognize that 199A, small businesses are the backbone of the economy. So I definitely think that you will see a willingness to do what we can. And, as a nod to whoever in the chat just said what economy to me earlier, I think you'll see a little bit of a nod to trying to protect that as best as we can, seeing how a lot of people haven't fared so great over the last few weeks as the president, embarks on this rebalancing of the trade around the world. But I have not heard that 199A is in a bad position. Now it might stay the same, but I think that by and large, the Republican base recognizes the value of a strong small business sector in our economy. And I think that, especially as they slant more to the populist side, that plays in your favor, right? Because they're maybe less concerned about big corporations and more concerned about the mom and pops of the world.
So I have a question for Bart, which is, can you give us an estimate of a timeline? We're all concerned how long this is going to take to get done, and maybe you could walk us through that.
Sure. I mean, I think that all depends on how the next couple of days go here in DC. The speaker and the majority leader have laid out a very aggressive timeline in the House, right? The committees have already been pre-writing in essence. I mean, the majority leader started last year instructing committees to get ready for this when everyone thought they were crazy for saying they were going to have the majority in the House and the Senate and the White House. So the House is leaps and bounds ahead of the Senate when it comes to the actual policy writing of a reconciliation bill. The speaker and the leader have laid out a plan to have this thing to the president by the Memorial Day recess, right? So that's 4 weeks post the Easter recess that we're almost upon to get it done. That's a very aggressive timeline. Do I think that timeline holds? No, I don't think they get there on that timeline. I do think it is very possible that timeline stretches into the summer. I think they could get it done. I've told people publicly, I've said by August recess. Privately, I think that they could get there by July 4th recess. So we'll see.
Well, and I'll give you one last. I know that your time's limited, Bart, but one last question, maybe if you have an answer to this, if not, understandable. Any truth that Trump has threatened to find primary challengers against Republicans that don't support his agenda, and that Musk will finance those campaigns? I
haven't heard it straight from the horse's mouth. I certainly think that we have evidence from previous years that show that, he has a stomach for that. But I think we'll see. I think, a lot of people throw their hands up in the air and say, I'm a no, I'm opposed, because they want attention and they want time with the president. And so my thoughts are a lot of the folks that are publicly no right now are looking for that attention, and I think they're going to get it here in the next couple of days. But yeah, I mean, I don't think this president's shy about using his power where he can. And so, but I don't have evidence directly that tells me that, but it wouldn't surprise me either, I guess, is the short
Okay.
answer.
Well, thank you
very
for that.
much, Bart, for joining us today. We appreciate your insight. Glad to have you here at Brownstein. I hope to have you back someday.
Thanks so much, Pat. Everybody, thanks for having me.
All right. Thank you, Bart. Take care.
Bye.
So Russ, I see that Preston has now joined, so I'm going to turn back to you to have you moderate a discussion between Michael and Preston and yourself around what is happening with just budget resolution process and how's it going to lead to the reconciliation process, a little bit around the timing as well. And what do you think is going to be included in the package? What things are going to be left out? And give us your insights. And there was a question in the Q&A around Section 174. So I don't know if you can comment on that or not, but I think any insights that you have would be most appreciated.
All right, we will comment on 174. We'll get to those business items here shortly. Let me quickly introduce our panel. We've got a brilliant tax attorney, Michael Hawthorne from Squire Patton Boggs. Michael does more work for this organization than anyone outside of Pat and John Gugliotta. And so we're proud to have him here today. His insights are incredible. His relationships on the Hill are marvelous. And so thank you for joining us, Michael. Michael is a Republican. Preston Rutledge is also with us. He's one of my colleagues at Brownstein. He actually served in the first Trump administration as I'll get it wrong, Preston, I'm sorry. He was at EBSA, the group at the Department of Labor. He was a Deputy Assistant Secretary of Labor for Employee Benefits, handling all those issues related to employer-sponsored retirement and other benefit plans like health plans. So Preston, thank you for joining us.
You're welcome. And of course, before that, Senate Finance Committee during TCJA 2017, after you had left, working with our friend Mark Warren, who was with Thune at the time.
Yeah, that's great. I met Preston on the Hill. We worked together at the Finance Committee. Okay, Bart Rising just told us he thought the House was going to find the votes, and all these folks like Keith Self, Lloyd Smucker, Chip Roy, and others who say I'm a definite no are going to change their minds, and they're going to vote yes. We'll see how that plays out over the next few days. But let's just assume that they do. Then tell us what happens next. It's traditional that the House goes first. Michael, is that what's going to happen? And is Jason Smith and the Ways and Means Republican, are they really ready to move forward?
Yeah, I think they are. I think in many ways, and Bart kind of alluded to this, the work of drafting the bills, especially on the House side, has already started. We know that Ways and Means Committee Republicans have held several members-only meetings in the last few weeks, including the week that we were last in Washington, to outline their proposals for the bill. On a technical side, the budget resolution instructions direct the committees to report their proposals by May 9th. So I think it's likely that we'll see some immediate action on the staff level over the coming recess. And then when the members return to Washington in late April, early May, to begin having public hearings on proposals.
So, Michael, can the Ways and Means Committee go ahead? Isn't the amount of tax cuts that they can spend, which is, I think, 4.5 trillion, isn't that a little bit dependent on the other committees actually coming up with spending cuts that would help finance it within the budget frame for the House?
Yes. So there's I'm referring to them with triangle dials. So there's an incentive in the budget resolution to reach a $2 trillion spending cut. The difference above 2 trillion gets tacked on to the Ways and Means Committee instructions. And if they fail to meet that $2 trillion target, there's discretion for the budget chairman to revise the Ways and Means number down. So I think there's going to be some communication among the committees. There's several committees that have instructions in the reconciliation instructions section. But I think, like I said, and like Bart alluded to, these chairmen are already having these dialogues. They're identifying areas where they may have untapped spending cuts. So I think they're going to work closely on this, and they'll know about where their target is.
Okay, great. Let's move to the Senate side. Preston, the Constitution says that the tax revenue measures have to start in the House, but it doesn't say that the Senate has to wait until they're finished. Tell us sort of the thought process. You work for Chairman Hatch, you work closely with Crapo, you know how they think. What is their thought process? How quickly do you think Finance Committee in the Senate will move forward?
I do think they'll wait for the House. They will wait for they want to wait for the House. They hope the House Ways and Means Committee will do their markup the first week of May, or if not the week before, but probably the first week of May. And then it gets across the House floor. The Senate likes to receive the tax bill from the House floor. And then they ultimately, when the time comes, they keep that bill title, that bill number, and they strip it out and they pour the Senate document into it and send it back to the House for a final vote. That's classically how it happens. There's a lot to happen after the House finishes, but they will prefer, I'm sure, to let the House finish, and hopefully that's in May. And as soon as it lands in the Senate, then it turns into the Senate process, the reconciliation legislative process, Finance Committee markup, parliamentarian briefings, you know, right and left. They finally get it onto the floor. And I think their target, although this may be a little inconsistent with what we might be hearing from the White House in the last few weeks, I believe the Senate target was to sort of finish their piece in early to mid-June, get it back to the House, and get something to the president's desk by the end of June, on or before July 4th recess, not wait until August. If it goes according to what I think would be the procedure they were thinking, that's what I think would happen. I do know the president has said he wants a bill to sign by Memorial Day, at the end of May, but I don't know that would really be feasible. But I think it's feasible for the House to finish by the end of May and for the Senate to pick it up and then be finished by the end of June. That is breakneck speed, by the way. Even that is in breakneck speed, but I think there's a lot of motivation to get it done.
Thank you, Preston. Let's move on to the substance then of what's going to be in these bills. I'm going to ask you a difficult question. Which of the TCJA priorities do you think is most likely to not be extended at all, or to be extended but in less than complete, full 100% fashion? And I'll give you some choices here. I'll include the 174 expensing of the R&D expenditures that we've had a question about, but I'll also say, would it be that, or would it be 199 Cap A? Would it be the AMT? Would it be the top rate for millionaires, or those in the 37% bracket, or estate tax exemption, or something else? Which one item do you think is the most in trouble? This organization under Pat's leadership has been fighting to extend all of them at their full 100% structure now, but which one is the most trouble? Michael, you go first.
Russ, I think I'm not going to give you a specific provision. I think I'm most concerned about full retroactivity. I think there's a real risk that Republicans might heed President Trump's suggestion in his March address to Congress to make some of the expired business provisions retroactive to his inauguration day on January 20th. So that's what I'm watching closely.
Okay, so you feel confident that bonus depreciation and expensing of research and development expenses and also interest expense will get reinstated at some level, but you're not sure to be fully retroactive back to January of this year. And do you think it'll be fully 100% going forward, just not retroactive?
I think so, yeah. I think there might be a tailoring of some of the retroactivity in order to keep the costs down on that side of things and focus on growth moving forward. I think that's a comment that we've heard a lot in our discussions with staff is focusing on those pro-growth provisions.
Okay, Preston, which one do you think's in the most trouble?
So the ones you mentioned, I think I tend to be, I tend to think this might look a little bit more like 2012 when the Bush tax cuts expired or were expiring. And there was a big push to extend the individual rates in the Bush tax cuts. And the one thing at the end of the day they did not extend was the top individual rate. And of the list you gave, you just mentioned R&D bonus, 199 cap A, what have you. I think not extending the top marginal rate for the individual rates is maybe the one that would be most likely on the ones you listed to me. And there's a pattern for that in 2012. It's a heavy lift because they feel like they're allowing taxes to go up, even though it's on the top bracket.
Yeah, so there were actually developments on this today where a guy named Andy Harris, Republican from Maryland, stated he was for really looking hard at and could support a 40% rate on people making over $1 million. There's also Tom Tillis from North Carolina, who's on the Finance Committee, expressed some openness to it. But I will point out he actually said, but there'd have to be an exception for those pass-through businesses that get taxed individually rather than through their business entity. I think that means he said he was saying if we're going to raise the top rate, we got to make corresponding adjustments to increase the 199A deduction, but we'll have to check on that. So I do think
that's a very good point, because of the other ones you mentioned, the one that is constantly mentioned by almost everybody I've spoken to is making sure 199 cap A is protected, and allowing the top rate to go up hurts people the pass-through entities who pay their taxes on their individual return. You mentioned Andy Harris and the story today about creating a new bracket, a millionaire bracket at the top, like a new top bracket, and let 40% in marginal rate on million and above. People are sort of taking their posturing positions right now. There was a meeting at the White House today. The president was meeting with congressional tax writers, and Andy Harris was invited, and he declined to go. So there's some in the weeds posturing going on, but that always happens. I only say that because a little bit of the flavor of the Washington scene is always kind of interesting to see. I personally, and I apologize, I missed Bart's presentation, but I tend to think at the end of the day, the House will come around to what the president wants. That's
all right. We have a question from a participant here asking how much pushback are we seeing on the proposed accounting changes in the reconciliation process? They can't cut spending enough to pay for the extension of these cuts. I think he's referring to the battle over the current policy baseline versus the current law baseline, which it is true. The budget resolution now has two sort of accounting methods. The House accounting method works based off current law, which assumes all these tax cuts expire at the end of 2025. And so to extend them will actually cost money under the budgeting rules. Whereas the Senate is operating off a current policy baseline, which Chairman Crapo pushed, which says if it's current policy when we pass the law, then you don't have to acknowledge or pay for that. That doesn't mean they don't cost money. It just means procedurally they're treated more like spending provisions under the congressional accounting method, where we just assume that next year's appropriations are at least going to be as high as this year's. So I think there is some pushback that has occurred. Some of the members in the House and Senate both expressed concerns about the current policy baseline, but it didn't make the bill not pass in the Senate. And I asked the panelists, do you think this is a critical issue for getting the bill passed in the House, or is it some of the other items like the amount of Medicaid cuts and the other issues that are driving it?
I think it's probably more so the other issues that are driving a lot more of the real opposition. I think we're seeing some vocal opposition to current policy baseline, including from David Schweikert, who's a member of the Ways and Means Committee from Arizona. I can't imagine, or at least my prediction would be that it wouldn't be, I can't remember how Bart phrased it, but the death knell for the bill at this point. I don't think it'll hold it up.
I agree with that. I don't think it'll hold it up. There were two big things, and I thought it was fascinating that the House, that Thune and Johnson both ended up caving it one in each direction. Johnson wanted the debt limit in their bill, which had to have a specific dollar number. Thune didn't want that. Thune ended up accepting that, and that's in the Senate bill. Thune wanted policy baseline. Johnson didn't want that. After the Senate was in the passing theirs, the Johnson came out and said, you know, we'll see if the Senate can do it, sort of saying we can live with that. I think the appeal of the policy baseline, which means you assume that this year's tax rates going forward and not going up, you assume that doesn't cost money to keep the current tax rates in place. You're not increasing them or decreasing them, just keeping them in place. The biggest appeal to that is it gives them a lot more budget space, headroom to accomplish the president's priorities. He has priorities that you do have to raise revenue or cut spending to accomplish. No tax.
Okay, Preston, let me catch you there because that's what I want to move to, which is I think you're right that both chambers will accommodate some of President Trump's proposals, which are outside of TCJ on tips and overtime and Social Security benefits.
Right.
Why will they include those? Are they going to include them because Trump's demanding it, because they're good for the economy, because they're hearing from their constituents? What's the real reason, and how big do you think those cuts are going to be?
I would say yes. They're doing it because the president wants it. He campaigned on it. He won, he won big. The Senate appreciates being back in charge. The House appreciates being back in charge. But also beyond that, think of the voter interest groups. Age 65 and above, a voter cohort voted for President Trump in a big way. He wants to reward that. That's where he came up with his no tax on Social Security. Now, from a reconciliation perspective, you can't literally do that under the Byrd rule, but he could do something else to help the age 65 and up group. For example, he could enhance the standard deduction for people at age 65 and above. That we did that in 2017. They could further enhance it, and that would be a surrogate to give older voters something. The no tax on tips and the overtime, that's working class stuff, and the working class voted for him. He wants to reward that. The question will be numbers. It's all very dialable. I don't know about overtime, but no tax on tips is dialable. Limit it to hospitality. Don't allow, Washington consultants to suddenly start charging tips instead of retainers. That probably isn't going to be allowed. But that's why I think they know they have to put some of the president's proposals in there, if not all of them, and they need headroom to do that. And the policy baseline, if they win on that, that is the biggest single thing they can do to allow themselves to carry out the president's policies as well.
All right, let me go to Michael. Michael, you heard Frank talk about the tariffs a good bit, and Pat is noted that all businesses in the U.S. are really concerned about this. Are those tariffs here to stay for the next 4 years, or will Trump actually negotiate with other countries and reduce them back to close to where they were? Maybe get their assistance in some other arena in order to cut that deal?
I think some are here to stay, and I think some are capable of being negotiated away. I think President Trump genuinely views tariffs as a net benefit for the economy and for manufacturing. I think the auto tariffs are a great example of that. But I think you also see the president in the last 2 or 3 days kind of hinting at where there's opportunities for deals. So you saw this morning he called the acting president of South Korea and talked about energy purchases and LNG. He talked about energy purchases with the EU. So I think you'll see some of them pull away, including on Israel and other countries that Frank and you mentioned earlier. But some of these sectoral tariffs or these targeted tariffs, I think they're part of the new normal.
All right,
So
Pat,
Russ,
that's a good, I'll
yeah.
go back to you for further questions and discussion.
Yeah, so I want to bring you back to TCJA, so to talk about the priorities that are concerning many people on this call, and certainly are the priorities of Family Enterprise USA and Policy and Taxation Group. And Preston talked a little bit about the income tax rate. It would be very concerning if the income tax rate went back up, because 80% of family businesses operate as a pass-through. And maybe a big percent get to take advantage of 199A, but that's vulnerable as well. So income tax rate, we've talked a little bit about that. How about the estate tax? We haven't really talked about that. Bob Mancuso asked in the Q&A, what about Senator Thune's repeal bill? Does that really have legs? Is that really possible? He seems to have a lot of sponsors for it. And then some of the other concerns of the groups, Family Enterprise USA and Policy and Taxation Group, you've already talked about, which is R&D expensing, bonus depreciation, but capital gains is at play as well. So I'd like to address those issues, and let's start with the estate tax.
All right, well, I'll take a cut and let the other panelists respond. I think there is an opportunity to do more than just extend the exemption amount. I think it will be extended, but Senator Thune did introduce the bill. He has talked about it, and Senator Crapo actually mentioned it in a speech a couple of weeks ago as being one of the things he's hearing a lot from Republican senators about is, can we do more on the estate tax than just extending the exemption amount? That hopefully means that he'll be looking at things like rate reduction that we've been talking about, but we're going to press on the accelerator to see if that's possible, to see if we can get the scores so that they feel comfortable they can afford it, but do something significant in the estate tax area. I still say it would be an uphill climb, but I'm feeling better about the estate tax than I was a couple of months ago, Pat.
Okay, good to hear. Do the other panelists have any comments about other provisions in TCJA?
Other than everything other than extending the individual rates comes down to magnitude based on how much it costs and whether they can find pay-fors that people can live with. And it's sort of a cascading issue. The more things cost, the more they need pay-fors, the more they do pay-fors, the more they hurt businesses. And B-salt's an example of that. In fact, we've even got B-salt at such a stage where it's almost, I personally think it's going to show up in the chairman's mark whenever that drops, Ways and Means chairman's mark. But the contours of it are hard to, well, the more they need pay-fors, the more you're going to see problematic things cropping up. So to me, we're getting close to the point where it's going to be about dials and pay-fors and how much does it cost. And there's all these great things what you want to do, but you can't afford to do them all. And Crapo talks about that constantly. He says he's got 280 excellent proposals from the members of his committee on things they should do, but they can't afford to do them all. So they've got to decide which ones they can do and which ones they can't.
Pat, the item that we've heard the least about is really capital gains. Of course, the main adjustment in TCJ was expanding the bracket so that more people get the advantage of the lower capital gains rates. There was not a rate change per se, but I do think that one's in good shape.
Haven't we? We've also heard something about carried interest, which kind of surprised me a little bit, but have you seen something on that? I thought that was interesting.
Well, that's what President Trump has argued, and is a subset or specialized component in the capital gains debate.
Right.
I think he's going to have to be a lot more specific and push it. I'm not sensing any interest from Capitol Hill of doing that one. I think they're more interested in doing his tax cuts than his tax increases.
Well, thank you so much, panelists, and Russ for moderating the panel. With the few minutes we have remaining, I'd like to just give a quick update on our activities. For those of you that came to the Congressional Family Business Caucus event that was hosted and facilitated by Family Enterprise USA, It was an unofficial caucus event because the caucus has not been formed yet in this session of Congress. It's being formed currently, and the co-chairs are being discussed in terms of who they're going to be and what their role is going to be. But the meeting on March 11th in DC was very successful. The theme was women-owned businesses. We had 8 women-owned business on the panel. And it was a well-attended event with 7 members of Congress and about 75 people in the room. And everyone knows that it is recorded and sent out on all social media and our email platforms. So please, the next meeting is May 14th. We'd love to have you attend. The theme is going to be charitable giving and volunteerism. So if you have an interest in that, again, we hope you'll attend, and you can contact John Gugliana and he can give you the details on that. I'd also like to mention that we really appreciate our trade association members. We now have 19 trade association members. With those trade association members, Family Enterprise USA is just 9,000 members short of 1 million members. We're very excited about that. We now have a very loud voice in Washington, D.C., and members of Congress are listening to us. So once again, we appreciate your support. We appreciate you being on this call today, and we wish you all the best, and we hope to see you again in Washington, D.C. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.